The His Girl Friday podcast is brought to you in part by Messenger Fellowship, living the kingdom, fulfilling the call, proclaiming the truth.
Happy New Year, friends. You know who this is. It's yours truly, Cameron J. Fry, His Girl Friday. Hope you guys are doing well. Can't believe that the last digit of the year is a 6. Feels like yesterday I was starting my new job at Mercy Multiplied. Still there, by the way. That was November 28th, 2023. And to go, I feel like in a blink of an eye, we've gone from a 3 to a 6. 2024, 2025. It's not just last year, which flew by pretty fast, but it's like the last 2 years have suddenly just zoomed on by. And here we are. January 11th is the date I'm cutting this. Maybe not the date that we'll post, but a lot to talk about. Little time. I like to keep these pods on the shorter side, i.e. 15, 20 minutes. We'll see if I could hold true to that duration as we go forward. But I wanted to impart some encouragement as we get going this year. It's a new year, so new content awaits. Last year, I don't want to say I dropped the ball. I just was intentionally, lax is not the best word, but I didn't podcast as much as I would have hoped. And as the year went on, I just decided to, you know what, the pace is kind of not what it needs to be. Maybe I just make these quarterly post 2 blogs a month, which stayed consistent. I believe we got up to almost 25 posts in 2025. That's pretty good for just a person in my situation. I'm going to talk a little bit about just 2025 narratives that are impacting the present. And then I'll give some exhortation to something that I think applies to all of us and what we could take with us in the months ahead. So 2025 was, and I don't want to get so sidetracked in recap mode, but it wasn't quite the year I was hoping for 365 days ago. When I look back on 2025, the first 2 months went according to plan, but then starting in March, things just started to really turn, and not necessarily for the better. I could say, as a general covering and analysis, 2025 was that one step back after a 2-step forward kind of year. Now, 2023, man, that was like, I don't know, like, that was more than 2 steps back. I don't know. It's like I'm in this back and forth. You know, when Juju was alive, people would say, well, there was a lot of steps back. No, there was a lot of steps forward, actually, during our 400-day stint in the NICU between 21 and 22. The last 3.5 years have just been brutal. I know I've praised my current employer and just the opportunity I have. You know, God's leading there, and that still holds. But it's just been a tough ride internally. And so we could say 23 was like 2 steps back. 24 was 2 steps forward. A lot reclaimed. A lot of 24 was getting my feet back under me and being in a new headspace as I started a new job. Last year was the sophomore year at Mercy, and it was my expectations and goals for the year were constantly being tailored and pruned. There was setbacks more of, again, like 23, more of the internal kind, but ultimately a little bit of lingering bereavement grief meets autistic burnout meets, you know, not to get too dark here, but suicidal misdirection. Yeah, that took a deep turn, but as of now, I'm in a good place, and a lot of that is because I'm in counseling at the Refuge Center. I had a really positive experience there in 2020 and 21. My last, I have to break it down in seasons. Refuge Center season 1 ended July 23rd, 21, just 2 weeks before we found out anything was wrong with Jubilee, unless pregnancy with Jubilee, which only 10 days later would result in preeclampsia and premature labor. Now, season 2, it's mostly getting back to basics and square one. with all things healing and counseling. Honestly, I should have started my healing journey 2 years ago after 2023. I didn't. And a lot of that was my son, Milo, got attacked by a dog, which really changed the course of 2024. My kids, they all need their own healing and counseling and therapy journeys. Lists as well. We all do. But I was, long story short, putting my kids before myself, and that's generally the right move. But at some point, you have to figure out how to make it an and statement, not an or statement. Kids need to come first. Make sure that, especially Milo, he's my autistic son who is 6 now. We've had to result in occupational and trauma therapy with him these past 2 years, and he's come a long way. I mentioned that, though, it may seem like a random anecdote, but I say that because I have pushed back my own counseling. And when those 6 words I just mentioned, autistic burnout, bereavement, grief, suicidal misdirection, you can't, I've learned, and 25 in part taught me this, you can't kick the can down the road and think you're going to be okay. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet. You have to start as soon as possible and figure out a way to make that a priority. I didn't do that. And I think if I had done that sooner, some of 24 and especially 8 months of 2025 would have gone better. Part of the struggle for me in 2025 was, coming in and still holding on to the best of seasons past, things I had moved on from in the flesh, but still wanted to carry over some positive momentum. And I look back even on the Cam of 6, 9, 12 months ago. You could even say between the Cam of 6 to 26 months ago. And one of the lessons I've taken away is sometimes when you move on from a place, it could be a town, it could be a church, it could be an employer, it could be a social group, and you really feel the need to draw a line in the sand. Don't draw it and then go back and try and reposition it. Pray and seek the Lord during the onset. Like, where does this line need to be? What are your parameters? What are your boundaries in terms of, putting myself in position to not look back? And I've looked back way too much the past few years, and it's almost driven me to, we'll call them low simmer boiling points. Maybe not so low simmering in hindsight, just because of sometimes the anxiety that you run into unexpectedly. But yeah, moral of the story is sometimes you want to carry over the best of seasons past so you could feel better about yourself. Feel like, okay, well, that season was tough, but it's not a complete loss. Here's why. And we feel like we have to sustain certain positives into the present. We feel like if they die, the whole thing dies, where it's like, just appreciate what you had in the moment. You may never talk to this person again or this group of people again, and that's okay. But to the people who, for a season where your biggest supporters, biggest encouragers, don't feel like you have to, carry with them. I was doing that, and it was not intended to be weight, but it became weight. So, and I've had to really move on, hard stop, and it was more of a soft stop, too soft, if you will. Moving on is hard. I'm not the best at it, but I'm sure learning a lot of lessons and certainly how to do things the right way. I'm not bashful. I'm not going to soft serve when it comes to being teachable on here and being humble on here. There's things that I wish I could have done better, even though I look back and it's like there's the need to show compassion and grace for being in situations way over my head. I've wrestled in 2025. I did a lot of wrestling with God. Why did you think this was a good idea? Why did you put me here? Why did you lead me here? And why did you call me out sooner? Where was your protection? Where was your hand? You knew, I get that sometimes God's going to lead us in places that are outside our comfort zone. In some cases, like, he called us on the water. There's a good chance we're going to sink. He calls us and leads us into places that based on the most likely scenarios, is going to be too much for us to handle. Now, temptation is different. There's a passage in Corinthians 4 that talks about, God not leading us into places that are beyond us in terms of what we're tempted to endure. But there are times where he will call us into places where it's just the sum of anti-fits, as we'll call them, where you're a fish out of water in a Pandora's box, square peg, round hole situation. He's going to sometimes call us in situations where the sum of the parts, man, it's just too much. But it's not about where we've been, but who we're becoming, and learning to lean on God in all things and in all situations. And really, when I look at my life and the journey it's been this entire decade, I've realized how my walk with God worked conditionally and not unconditionally. And that's going to be true for all of us in certain ways because we're human, we're finite. We reach points where it's like, wow, I've hit a brick wall here, and there's only one place to go in the situation if you want to overcome, and that's up. But sometimes we look around, it's like, well, how am I supposed to get above this? And when we look up, we really should, there's no really any subjectivity. Like, we need to seek the Lord, reference him, cry out to him, bring him in, invite him into our midst. We have to connect with him. We have to clean him. I can throw out several other verbs, so you get the picture. And just like any stretch or season of life, there's moments where you did that well, and you can look at the other side and be like, but I didn't do it well here. And sometimes what you don't do well, there are consequences and there's costs. But it's important for us to remember it's about who we're becoming, and that's not lost on God. We don't forfeit that. We can resist God. We can even deny him. Not saying I did those things, but in certain cases, I have been close, or in times just believing, God, I think you have forsaken me. I really think you have abandoned me here. And that's kind of why 2025 was so tough. Is I would often start the day on a good note in prayer and quiet time, reading the word, soaking in the Spirit, but I would end the day just buying something that wasn't of him, and going and falling asleep to the thought of God has not been there when I've needed him most. He's abandoned me through the fellowship of the saints. He's abandoned me through, leading me to places that I wasn't made for. God, certainly you know me better than anyone. Do you understand? And you know every person better than they know themselves. Why do you think this was a good idea? It was always going to go up in flames. It was always not going to work. And that's not, there are scenarios you could go back in hindsight's 2020. You could be like, well, if this changed and this changed, if this changed in me earlier, if this changed in this person earlier, there's a scenario where I could have survived this, and it would have been less arduous. So letting go of the past, I think that's a theme that you're noting here. It's a journey for all of us, and it was a journey for me last year, and letting go. You could say that the table is set better for 2026 to be a really great year, and that's encouraging. Last year, I just didn't know where the year was going. I was hopeful, but my expectations for, from Mercy to church to family to secondary endeavors, I had plans. A lot of them didn't hit the intended goal from the beginning, and part of that was because I got in kind of this rut that I will unpack later this year. It was a painful rut, and I think you could look at that rut as almost a stall, if you will. Juju's book, at least I found an editor I could partner with, but not a lot of new content. Not a lot of new content on the book front was produced in 2025. Plenty on his Girl Friday, and we kept that going while we're waiting. That our monthly bereavement parent support group, it's been virtually since April 24th. That continued on. So there were good things on paper. Oh, and even, I almost forgot, just technically, Liz and I are a part of a test support group at Vanderbilt for grieving parents, bereaved parents who are looking to improve the hospital experience, the NICU experience for those who have extended stays. There's good things happening, but ultimately, I just feel like you're running on empty. I feel like I'm running on empty with the hand dealt. So, all right, look at that. I'm already at the 15-minute mark, and I need to make a turn. So, sorry, I got to bring this in for a landing. For the next 5 minutes, I want to talk about a goal that we could all aspire to, and that is committing our ways to the Lord. This exhortation brought to you by two verses, among others. One is Psalm 37:5, and the other is Proverbs 16:3. Now, Psalm 37:5 talks about committing your ways to the Lord and also trusting in Him, and it shall come to pass. Proverbs 16:3, it's not the only proverb that talks about our steps being established walking with the Lord, but it starts that verse starts with commit your work into the Lord, and He will establish your steps. That theme is actually consistently referenced in the Psalms and Proverbs, but we'll park it with those two passages for now. And it was interesting, it hit me on my walk the other day just how in each of these passages, commit comes first and then trust. It's not trust then commit, it's commit then trust. And that order is significant. Even if we feel like our trust is half-mast, our faith in God in a particular situation or scenario, 30, 40, 50%, we know it's not full. We know there's room to believe more. We're wrestling in our faith. We could still commit our ways. It's not like we have to get our trust in order. It's not like we have to just be like, okay, well, I got to wait till my faith is maxed out and then I will, commit. I think a lot of us, we wait around, we don't get anywhere. We stall out because we're hesitant to fully surrender to the Lord, when really it's like, no, we got to think the other way, where we could surrender to God in any moment. We could come before Him and be like, I am either empty or halfway. I feel even lukewarm. There's times where I'm like, God, I just feel dadgum tepid. And I hate it. I want to love what you love more. Fill me with that. And also fill me with, a fear of the Lord, which also implies hating what God hates. Help me to know these things in greater measure. Here's where I'm depleted in. Here's what I feel like I'm lacking. And Lord, show me by your Spirit, illuminate the parts that maybe I'm missing. What is it exactly you need me to receive from you in this moment? And just crying out to the Lord like that. Teach me, guide me, enlighten me the way I'm supposed to go. I know I can't get the whole picture, but maybe this next stepping stone, that would be nice. But sometimes we have to forget about just seeing the stepping stone in front of us and just being like, God, I just need more of you right now. There's no other way. I literally have no other option, no other resource. Everything else I've tried doesn't work. And quite frankly, God, I'm sick of trying. I'm sick of efforting and striving in my own strength. That type of dependence, God's not going to turn an ear on. He's going to receive that. And maybe even honor it, depending on what you're crying out about. But He will meet you in that moment. He will guide you. He will be faithful to show up in some way. And it may not be an immediate answer, by the way. I'm not saying He will communicate or convey something in a specific way at a specific time, but He will. I've found when I've come before the Lord, at the very least, I have this down positive peace that sustains me, and it transcends all understanding, and I sense the joy, peace interlocking, and that's something that I hope you and I can mature in and experience more of in 2026. I really do. In fact, I'm excited about that, continuing on more. So that's my encouragement. It's not super long. It's just commit your ways to the Lord, your goals, your resolutions, resolutions, whatever they may be, your ambitions, passions, projects, whatever. And don't just commit, but then walk and abide in Christ so that trust has a kind of an on-ramp or what's the word I'm looking for? Not platform, but essentially a runway. There we go. A runway to develop and be cultivated. A runway for trust to grow vertically. It's not a one-time cry out or a one-time request. You have to make that request known, but it's like that starts a journey where it's like, okay, trust can be rebuilt. And since I have partially kind of turned a cold shoulder to God in certain ways last year, I've reverted posture. That's partly maybe why I haven't done so many podcasts, because I was struggling so hard to even get to the point where I had the motivation to cut these. But I'm aligned and I'm postured in this moment. There were mistakes. There's been several of them in recent years. Now, I'm excited. One of the reasons I am excited personally is because I have said yes to the help. That was a big development in December, and I am on my way, and it's an indefinite healing journey. This could be 6 months, it could be 16, 20, it could be a couple of years. But one way or another, we're going to get there, because I've said yes to God and something that I was slow and hesitant in saying yes to. And God doesn't give up on you. For those who maybe are like, oh man, I'm hesitant to do this thing because I know I should have started sooner. Better late than never, I promise. And watch what God will do, because he will redeem and be faithful to restore some of that which was lost. But, sometimes you hit this surge of spiritual momentum, and it's like, man, there's just a lot happening. And suddenly, like that, for me, 2012 was one of those years where it felt like a 2 years in one in the best way possible. There had been years of backsliding, trailing in, and then suddenly just things started working and clicking into place. And it just was like, this was the equivalent of multiple years of progression, advancement, healing, all concurrent. And it was the mystery of reconciliation, restoring places that had been either put on pause because of that backsliding or had been lost entirely because of that backsliding. So we just need not to be afraid to talk to God. We need not to be afraid to walk with God. We have everything to do. We have everything to gain being honest with where we're at, and then inviting him into his midst, and just knowing that he's not going to forsake us. And please, for those of you listening to this, if you made it this far, please believe in your heart that God is not going to leave or forsake you. He may guide you into places where you're lonely, but that's not the same as him forsaking you. And I think some of you need to hear that. He may guide you into places temporarily where there's not a lot of people around you to rely on and pull on, but love one another, love your neighbor as yourself. Those Matthew 22:37 basics, those golden rule principles that you know and have likely grown up on. Be consistent in showing good, and be consistent in not being deterred or discouraged by evil. And watch what God will do. Go from there. Don't make life too complicated. There's a lot of complexities in life, but when in doubt, keep things close to the helm. Keep things in a simple place. And by simple, I mean making sure you are creating channels to communicate with God and going back to those wells consistently. Establish positive rhythms. And that's what, to me, January, a new year is about. Where did I get offline? What can I do to change maybe some of the areas that went off the rails, got a little wonky? How do I keep this rhythm going? And don't just start your day well, because that was another thing I was going to say for me in 2025. I would start my days well. I didn't end my days well. I wish I could have been consistent and congruent in how I started and ended each day, because ultimately I didn't realize it at the time, but I was making some agreements with the enemy that was poisoning my heart and allowing bitterness and resentment, anger to fester and grow. And then eventually I had to make some hard decisions in order to cut that off, and to be like, I had to come to the end of myself in some ways and accept the fact that, yeah, I messed up. There's not going to be a happy ending here. So hard when we can't control the outcome, right? But again, I go back to what I said what I said earlier a few minutes ago. It's not about where we've been, but who we're becoming. And because of that, we don't have to get stuck in our why, God, why, but what is it you're wanting to teach me? What is it you're wanting to learn from the situation and apply moving forward, so I can go and sin no more, or go and make better decisions with this new perspective, with this new awareness that you've given me, and just watch God start to put pieces of the puzzle together as you walk in lockstep with him. I've told the Lord in my prayer walks, I don't want to just walk with you. I want to walk in lockstep. I want to know what that is. I want this holy curiosity I have within me to blossom. But I'm not going to be able to really know certain things in depth without that lockstep. And there are certain there's certain verses in the Message translation talks about the lockstep abiding in Christ, where it's just like, I'm so clinging on to you. I don't want to, co-share or co-rely on you with even my own spouse, or let alone, something innocent that could become a place of idolatry. I mean, I think for some of us, our social circles become idolatry real quick. We care what people think, and we have care to give. We just abuse that care. We have something positive to bestow upon other people. We have the nature of God in us for those who Christ dwells within. It's okay to want to pour out life on people and to experience life on life with people. But don't let that become a crux where, like I did, you feel like you have to sustain things. You have to constantly reach out and even inquire. And on paper, it looks fine, but in your heart, you're trying to feel secure outside of Christ. Do whatever you have to do so that your security is 100% tied to Christ and your identity in him. Don't minimize your security. Don't minimize who you are, desperate to see it reflected and manifest in other people. If you do that, you're going to be disappointed constantly because people cannot measure up. We cannot measure up. If we're all running our own races but looking to the same God for what we need to give, that's how his kingdom comes. That's how we experience heaven on earth. And the problem is we're just going to run into people where it's just, again, they're not in tune, they're not in lockstep, even of believers. So it's not just those who don't know Christ, it's those who are compromising or kind of mixing and matching in some area of life, and their reliance is impure. What do we do when we encounter someone who their reliance on God is impure? I do think we have to watch what we say and how we correct and how we, I know it's good to have boundaries and parameters, but sometimes we could even exalt them to the point where we don't say what we need to say in love. Maybe we wait after a while and finally it's just like, I've had enough. I'm just going to, a lot of us, we get frank. We just, we become straight shooters and we say things that need to be said, but maybe without the compassion. We want to do it because we just want to see it stop. And suddenly we've missed an opportunity to love our brother and really help build them up the way Jesus would have, in an empowering way. There's going to be more we talk about on all these subjects. And for now, I really need to pack it in because we're a little over here. But I do appreciate you listening, and I'm not hesitant, again, to be vulnerable with you because I know that can maybe inspire you to be vulnerable in the right places, in the right spaces with people whom God has put in your life for a reason, for such a time as this. So go forth and be empowered, be encouraged, be inspired. And just know that Liz and I, as always, are here to help you in any way we can. I almost forgot. This is a huge life announcement. January 17th, our final small fry, I call our bag fry, Jory Grace, was born. So that's going to be something that we deal with, contend with. That family integration, we're now a family of 5 kids on surface. We're a 7th heaven reincarnate. We're going to start a new channel called 5 Alive, where it's more just family updates, kids updates. And, Caden's 10, Evie's 8, Milo's 6, Julie would have been 4 if you're still here, Eileen's 2. And that's just where we're at with all the kids in their ages. So it does keep us on our heels and also the tip of our toes at the same time. I'm not sure how that works as parents, and it does sometimes cut time out. Sometimes I have to go to the car or the garage to record these podcasts, so that I apologize. The production quality isn't always that great. But still, the show will go on one way or another, and I'm just thankful for the opportunity to live, have breath, and praise the Lord through doing these. So, love you all. As always, I'll catch you on the fry. Peace.